The waiting room went silent as he slid divorce papers across the table in front of strangers. His brother filmed it. His mistress smiled. Behind the doors, the surgeon saving his mother's life was still in surgery, completely unaware that his entire fee had already been paid by the same wife he was discarding. But before that pen ever touched that table, the day started like this. Grace Mercy Hospital stood on the north side of Atlanta, tall and gray, humming like it never once slept. Up on the fourth floor, the surgical wing had a room where families came to sit and pray and wait for news. That morning, the room was full, and in the middle of it stood a woman named Naya. She had gotten there first. She always got there first. When the call came before sunrise that Della had collapsed in her kitchen, it was Naya who dressed in the dark. Naya who drove the empty streets with the radio off. Naya who signed the first stack of forms with a steady hand while the rest of the family was still hunting for their shoes. By the time they came rushing through the doors, everything that needed doing had already been done. Nobody thanked her. Nobody in that family ever once thought to. She was not a big woman, and she did not fill a room the way some people do. She had a way of going still that made folks forget she was there at all. Her coat was plain, her shoes were sensible. In her lap she held a plain leather bag she never set down. If you passed her in the hall, you would have taken her for a tired auntie waiting on a bus, and you would have been so wrong it should scare you. Her husband, Theo, came in loud, the way he came into every room. Tall man, sharp jaw, a voice built to carry over other people. He did not look at his wife when he entered. He looked past her, the way a man looks past a coat rack he simply expects to hold his coat. "Any news?" he asked the room. "They took her back a little over an hour ago," Naya said, gentle. "Dr. Boyd is with her now. He came out himself and told me that the next few hours are the ones that count, and that—" "I asked the nurse, not you," Theo said, and walked straight past her to the desk. Naya closed her mouth. She had learned a long time ago that words spent on Theo in front of people came back to her later with interest. So she folded her hands and lowered herself back into the corner chair, the one nobody else wanted, near the window that never quite shut. Then his brother arrived, and the temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. Malik was the older one, heavier, slower, with eyes that were always adding something up in a column only he could see. He clapped Theo on the shoulder, looked around like he was pricing the furniture, and let his gaze settle on Naya the way you'd notice a stain on a clean white shirt. "She's here," Malik said. Not to her, to the air. "Course she's here. Every time something goes bad in his family, I look up and there she is, sitting in a corner. Trouble walks in on 2 feet and wears her face." A couple of strangers on the far bench glanced up, then found somewhere else to look, embarrassed for her. Naya said nothing. She only drew the bag an inch closer against her. The doors sighed open again, and a different kind of woman walked through them. Vanessa. Sleek coat, gold at the ears, the sure heels of somebody who had never in her life been told to wait in a hallway. She came straight to Theo, slid her hand in the bend of his arm like it had a reserved seat there, and smiled at the room as though the room should thank her for showing up. How is Mother Della holding on? And the way she said Mother Della, so warm and so familiar, landed like a flat hand across a cheek. Naya felt it land. She did not let one muscle in her face give her away. A young nurse stepped over with a clipboard and looked from face to face. "And you are immediate family?" "She's family," Theo said before the air could even settle. His hand came down over Vanessa's on his arm. "Close family." The nurse nodded and moved on. And not one soul corrected him. Not Malik, who let out a low chuckle. Not Vanessa, who let her smile stretch a fraction wider. And not Naya, the wife, sitting 6 feet away in the corner, watching her husband hand her own name to another woman in front of a room full of witnesses. There were only so many chairs. When an older couple got up and shuffled off toward the chapel, 2 good seats opened near the window. Vanessa drifted toward one, then paused, delicate, like the last seat was somehow a problem. Theo looked at his wife. "Get up," he said. "Let her sit where it's comfortable. You're used to standing." He waved a hand toward the far wall, toward the open hallway beyond it. "Go on and wait out there. You'll feel more at home." For one long second, the whole room held its breath. A father with a sleeping child on his shoulder stared hard at his own knees. A young man by the vending machine stopped chewing mid-bite. Nia stood. She did not argue. She did not cry. She gathered her plain bag, smoothed the front of her coat, and walked toward the hallway with her back straight and her chin level, like a woman crossing a stage she never once asked to stand on. She did not hurry, and she did not shuffle. She walked like the floor belonged to her, which, in a way, none of them could have guessed. It did. Behind her, Malik chuckled again, lower. "Some women marry up and never do grow into it," he said. Vanessa settled into the warm chair and folded her hands in her lap, satisfied. "She's still holding his coat," she said, "sweet as syrup. When you get right down to it, that's about all she has ever been good for." Out in the hallway, alone, Nia leaned her shoulder against the cool wall and let one long breath go. Then her phone buzzed. She answered it low and turned toward the tall window at the end of the corridor, where the city spread out gray and endless and nobody could hear her. "Yes," she said, "approve it. Whatever Dr. Boyd's team calls for today, all of it, it's covered. And keep my name off the paperwork, same as it's always been." She listened a moment. "I know. Thank you. Just see that she comes through." She hung up. She reached into her bag and touched something worn and wooden, the way a woman's fingers find a rosary in the dark. Then she straightened, pressed the corner of an eye that had not quite spilled, and walked back into the room to sit with the very people who had just put her out of it. Here is a thing worth knowing before we go on. Nia had been shamed inside that family before, more than once, in front of more people than this. And every single time, without one of them ever noticing, something behind the curtain had shifted a little in her favor. Today would be the last time it ever needed to move. To understand why a woman can take so much and break so little, you have to go back. Back before Atlanta, before Theo, before any of these people ever learned her name. She was raised 2 hours south in a small Georgia town where the paved roads gave out and turned to red dirt at the edge of everything. Her parents were gone early, one to sickness, one to the long road that never brings a man home. And it was her grandmother, Miss Ruthie, who took the child in and raised her on scripture, hard work, and second-hand shoes. They did not have much, but Miss Ruthie had a spine like a fence post set in concrete. And she taught the girl that being poor and being small were two entirely different things, and that only one of the two was ever a choice. She used to say, "They can keep you broke, they cannot make you low. That part is between you and God, and it is nobody else's business." Miss Ruthie cleaned other people's houses across the good side of town. She came home most evenings with her knuckles cracked and her ankles swollen, and still, somehow, she cooked, and still she sat the child down on the porch in the last of the light and worked through her hair. It was on that porch, one heavy summer, that she pressed a small wooden hair comb in the girl's palm. It was old, dark, and smooth at the handle from more years of use than the child had been alive. "My own mama gave me this. Now it belongs to you." A woman who can sit still and work through the knots slow, no yanking, no fussing, no panic in her hands. That woman does not lose her head when the storm comes. And baby, the storm always comes. Patience is a kind of power. This world is going to spend your whole life teaching you its weakness. Don't you believe them? Not for one single day. The girl carried that little thing everywhere from that evening on. It rode in her bag right now, on the 4th floor of Grace Mercy, more than 30 years later, warm from her own hand. She grew up soft-hearted in a way the world usually punishes. When a sick old widow down the road had nobody left, it was young Nia who sat up through the nights with her, spooning broth between cracked lips, changing the sheets, holding a near stranger's hand in the dark for no pay and no thanks and no reason but that it was right. She did not know it yet, but she was learning the one skill that would one day make her whole fortune: how to care for a human body when it fails, and how, in time, to build something strong and lasting around that care. She earned her first wages the same tender way, cleaning rooms at a little roadside motel through the summers. The pay was so thin that a full day bent over those beds back then would not stretch to cover one bag of groceries in the store today. But Naya kept a jar. Coin by coin, dollar by dollar, she filled it and hid it and filled it again for 10 long years, learning young the one truth nobody could ever pry out of her hands. What you build slow by your own 2 hands is yours in a way that no man can ever shame out of you. That was the girl, patient, tender, underestimated on purpose because being underestimated turned out to be far safer than being seen. Now hold that girl up against the woman sitting in the corner chair. Naya had met Theo when he was at the very bottom of his life, broke, doubted, laughed at by his own people, going exactly nowhere. And she had believed in him when nobody else would spend the breath. She lifted him. She stood behind him. She poured herself into the low place he was in until he climbed out of it standing on her shoulders. And that right there was the hairline crack that every other ugly thing grew out of. Theo never once forgave her for having seen him weak. A proud man will carry a debt like that his entire life and call it by some other prettier name. So what does a woman do with all that patience when year after year the world keeps mistaking it for something small? She waits, not because she is afraid of anybody, because she is building. And the thing about building is that it happens in a place your eyes can't reach until the day it's done. Now come on back up to the 4th floor, where the hours crawled by and the cruelty in that room stopped being the accident of small men and started being a plan. Because it was a plan. Naya did not yet know the whole shape of it. She was about to. Theo, Malik, and Vanessa had been busy for months. In hallways she wasn't standing in, and over dinners she wasn't invited to. They had built a story about Naya and told it back and forth so many times it hardened into something that felt like fact. That Naya was dead weight, that she brought nothing to the table but her silence. And the sharpest lie of all, the one Vanessa first whispered and Malik kept watering, that Naya was secretly sitting on a hidden pile she was keeping from her own husband, just waiting for the right day to strip the family down to the studs. That lie worked because it stood right next to a truth. Naya did have wealth, a great deal more than any of the 3 of them could have dreamed in their best sleep. But she had built it, not stolen it. And she had kept it out of sight not to rob these people, but to hold a fragile kind of peace together with her bare hands. A half-truth is the most dangerous lie there is, because part of it can look you dead in the eye and never once blink. In a corner of the wing, well out of Naya's sight, Malik finally said the real thing out loud, low and fast. "The buyer's getting cold feet. He won't put his name on anything while your house looks like a soap opera. A man in the middle of a nasty marriage reads as unstable, and he's not buying unstable. So we make it clean. You end this today, you sign her off, and that deal closes by Friday." He gripped his brother's arm. "That deal is the only thing standing between this whole family and the bottom. You hearing me? It has to be today." The family business was going underwater and dropping. And to these 2 men, ending Theo's marriage was not a heartbreak at all. It was housekeeping. One tidy move on a board they'd already drawn up. Vanessa worked the other side of him, the softer side, the side that had always been hungry for more than it had. "You have spent your whole life apologizing," she told him that afternoon, laying her palm flat against his chest, "for where you came from, for who you settled for. Your own family said you married beneath yourself, and every single day she stands near you, that is what the world gets to see. I don't make you look small, Theo. I make you look like somebody worth knowing. Stop apologizing for wanting more than that woman could ever hand you." "My whole life they said I'm married down," Theo said, staring at a spot on the wall. You make me feel like a man. Then be one, Vanessa said, before Friday. That was the whole of it, laid bare. No cackling monster in the dark, just a proud man, insecure, cleared down to the bone, being handed a permission slip to do the ugly thing he had already been aching to do. Greed for Malik, a business to save and a fortune to protect. Vanity for Vanessa, a bigger name, a brighter room. And for Theo, the oldest poison there is, the one that started the crack all those years ago. The terror of being the lesser man, dressed up in a good suit and called ambition. And Nia heard it. Not the whole of it, but enough. She had gone looking for a cup of coffee down the far corridor and stopped cold with her hand on a stairwell door, close enough to catch the shape of the thing. You end this today. You sign her off. The papers are already drawn. Timed for this precise day, to be handed to her here, in this building, while the man's own mother lay open on a table 2 floors up, because a man who means to break a woman clean in half does it on the day she is already down on her knees. Something went out of her, standing in that stairwell. She sank down onto the cold concrete step and sat there with the bag in her lap and her spine gone soft. For the first time all day, her stillness did not look like strength. It looked like grief, plain and heavy and old. She had loved these people. She had carried more than one of them on her own back through the low seasons. Her phone buzzed against her hip, and she let it. She stopped moving altogether. She just sat, hollowed clean out, a woman running on fumes and memory. Then her fingers found the worn wooden comb again, smooth at the handle, and all at once Miss Ruthie's porch came rushing back across all those years and all those miles, the slow hands, the no yanking, the storm that always, always comes. She turned it over once in her palm. She turned it over again, and somewhere behind her eyes the grief cooled and set and hardened into something with edges, something decided. Some bills come due quietly. Right there on that cold step, hers was being tallied, every year of it, every swallowed word. Every night she carried a whole family that could not bring itself to offer her a single chair. She stood up. She smoothed her coat. She walked back toward the room, and the waiting was over. Now watch close, because this next part is the part they filmed. This is the part they were so sure they had already won. Word came down through the doors that Della had reached the hardest stretch of the operation, the delicate hour, the surgeon's 2 hands, and nothing else on this earth standing between an old woman and the end of her road. Dr. Boyd was the finest in the whole state, the man every family begged for and almost none could get near. Della's life balanced on him alone right then as the clock crawled. And that was the exact hour Theo chose to strike, not by chance, by design. A man like that truly believes a woman at the floor of her strength will sign away anything on earth just to make the hurting stop. He came into the room with a leather folder tucked under his arm. Malik trailed a step behind, already lifting his phone, thumb hunting for the little red circle. Vanessa took the good chair by the window, crossed her legs slow, and let her mouth curve up at one corner. "Nia," Theo said, set the folder down on the low table between the benches, and slid it across the surface toward her, slow, so every stranger in the room could watch it make the trip. Divorce papers, right there, in the open, in front of them all. Sign it. The waiting room went silent. The father hushed his child against his shoulder. The young man at the vending machine went completely still. Nia looked at the folder. She did not reach for it. "You came into this family with nothing," Theo said, pitched loud enough to reach the back bench. "You will walk out of it exactly the same way. Sign, and we can all move on with our lives." Malik angled the phone in on her face. "Say something for the record," he said. "Let everybody see how nice and calm she takes it." Vanessa tilted her head, gentle as a blade going in. "Poor thing," she said. "I honestly don't think she even understands what is happening to her right now." For a moment, Naya sat with her hands folded in her lap, and the whole room read it as the white flag. She looked down. She reached into her bag and set the small wooden comb on the table beside the papers, careful, like a woman laying down a load she had finally carried far enough. Then she picked up the pen. But she did not sign. She lifted her phone instead, dialed a number she knew by heart, set it flat on the table on speaker so the sound climbed up and filled the whole room. A warm, professional voice answered on the second ring. "Good afternoon. This is the Boyd Surgical Foundation office." "It's me," Naya said, even and clear. "I need you to confirm something out loud, please. Nice and slow for the people in this room with me." "Of course, ma'am." A pause. Papers shuffling on the far end of the line. "Whatever you need. You are our founder and our sole benefactor. The foundation underwrites the entire charity surgical wing here at Grace Mercy. Dr. Boyd operates under your program. His fee today bills directly to your account, exactly as it always does. The Della case is already covered in full. Do you want us to proceed as normal?" You could hear the whole room breathing. "Yes," Naya said, her eyes never once leaving Theo's face. "Proceed. Save her." That part was never in question, not for 1 second. She ended the call and set the phone face down. For 10 long years, while these people called her dead weight to their face, Naya had been building something they could not see. Not stealing, not sitting on a stolen pile, building. She had taken that soft heart and that buried motel jar and that one skill she'd first learned holding a dying widow's hand, and she had grown it into a home health and surgical staffing company spread clear across the city, under a name not a one of them ever thought to connect to plain, patient Naya in the corner chair. And with what it earned, she had done one thing above all others. She had funded, out of sight and without a word, the very surgeon whose hands were in that exact minute the only thing keeping Theo's mother in the land of the living. The family that mocked her had been standing on her strength this entire time, and not one of them had ever felt the floor under their feet. The administrator on the line, still tidying up the account in her warm official way, let one figure slip loose before she hung up. The sum covered on the Della case alone. It was more than Theo's whole failing business had been worth on its best day in years. The math of the room rearranged itself in real time in front of everybody. Vanessa's smile came apart at the corners. Malik slowly lowered the phone he'd been so proud to hold. Theo stood very, very still, like a man who had just heard the ice crack under both his feet. Look at her hands. Not one tremble anywhere in them. That right there is 10 years of working slow through the knots and never once yanking. Naya rose to her feet. She did not raise her voice. She had never in her life needed to. "You wanted a record," to Malik, and his own phone was still running. "Here is your record. I own the program paying the man who is saving your mother's life. I have covered her care since before a single one of you knew her heart was weak." She turned to face her husband full on. "You carried papers into a hospital to break me on the one day your mother might not come home. I could pull my name off her file this instant and let this building hand you a bill you would not climb out of under 3 lifetimes. I could do it standing right here." She let that hang in the air where they could all look at it. "But I won't," she said. "I would never trade a woman's life to win a fight. She lives either way. That right there is the whole difference between you and me. You were willing to lose your own mother to win. I was willing to lose everything I had to keep her."
And here is what it cost Naya. Because this was never once a clean fairy tale, and I won't insult you by pretending it was. To prove she was not the thief they had painted on the wall, she had to burn down the one thing she truly loved. The separate, unseen life she had built far from these people, precisely so she could stay whole inside it.
It was hers. It was safe. And now it was gone, poured out in front of a room of strangers and a phone camera, and it would never be secret or protected again. Worse than that, and she felt it worse than that, the truth came down hardest on Della, the one soul in the whole family who had ever saved Nia a plate, ever squeezed her hand under a table, who would wake up out of that operation into wreckage her own son had built over her sleeping body. Nia had won, but she had set fire to her own house to do it. She knew it, and she did not smile. She reached down and took her grandmother's comb back off the table. She left the pen. She left the folder lying open and unsigned. Down the corridor, the light over the operating doors still burned steady red, which meant the old woman was still fighting, and the man Nia had paid for was still fighting right there alongside her. Those papers were never the ending of anything. They were the door. After that afternoon, the bill came due for every last one of them, but it did not come due even, because life almost never settles its accounts fair, and any story that tells you it does is selling you something. Theo lost the most, and he lost it the fastest. The buyer who wanted things clean really wanted things quiet, and Malik's own phone captured the loud and exact opposite, a man serving divorce papers over his dying mother's body while his mistress smiled in the good chair by the window. That clip did not stay inside the family. By the next morning, the deal was stone dead, and with it went the last rope holding the business up out of the water. The debt came in and swallowed the whole thing down. Theo was left with no wife, no company, and no name worth saying, the very thing he had sold his soul to protect. His pride was the engine under all of it from the start, and in the end, his pride was the thing that drove him straight off the road. He would spend his years telling anyone who'd listen a version of the story where none of it was his doing, and the fewer people believed him, the louder he told it. Malik went down with him, and in one way he went down harder. The video he had made to shame Nia turned into the cleanest possible record of Malik himself staging a forced signing during a life-or-death operation. It cost him the standing he had spent years and favors buying up around town. Men who used to take his calls stopped taking his calls, and the family holdings he had schemed so hard to shield got pulled under against the dead anyway, every last one of them. He had reached out for the whole world and closed his fist in a handful of air. But Vanessa, and this is the part that is going to sit wrong in your chest because it is meant to, Vanessa mostly walked. She read that room in about 4 seconds flat. She was up out of the good chair and gone before the ink was even dry on Theo's rumen, and by the end of that same month, she had already fixed her smile onto the next comfortable name in a nicer part of the city. She lost a little pride and one afternoon's worth of dignity. She did not lose much else. Some bills come due quietly, but not all of them ever do, and not for everybody, and don't you let a single story tell you different. Some folks always seem to slip out the side door a full minute before the check ever reaches their table. And Della, gentle Della, the one person under that whole family roof who had ever shown Nia a kindness worth the name, she lived. Dr. Boyd's hands held true, and the old woman came through the operation and opened her eyes on the far side of it. But she woke into a family blown apart at every seam, into the full and terrible knowledge of what her own son had done over her sleeping body, and the weak heart Nia had been paying for years to guard was never quite the same after that day. She was the innocent one in all of it.
Years back, at a family dinner where everyone else had talked over Nia, it was Della who had slid a warm plate in front of her and murmured that a house runs on the quiet hands nobody claps for. And she still caught the shrapnel that had been aimed at the guilty. That was the cruelest math in the whole story, and Nia felt it like a stone sewn in the hem of her coat, one she would carry from that day on.
Because Naya did not walk away untouched. Don't you let anybody sell you that ending. She grieved at the loss of Della, whom she still loved and could no longer so much as sit beside without every old wound tearing back open. She grieved the private life she had guarded for 10 years and could never fully build back now that the whole city knew her face and her name and her business. And she carried the particular lonesome ache of having loved so long and so hard and so well, a set of people who had never once, not for a single day, been standing on her side of the line. She left the marriage whole in her spirit, but she left it scarred, and the scar was real, and it did not fade on anybody's schedule. She kept the small wooden thing her grandmother had given her, and she did not look back a second time. Winning and healing do not happen on the same day. Give her both. Just don't ask her to take them both in the very same breath. Some seasons on down the road, in a small place she had chosen entirely for herself, Naya woke into a morning that belonged to nobody on this earth but her. She ran her company right out in the open now. No more hidden name, no more corner chair, no more shrinking herself down to fit inside a room that had never wanted her in it. But she lived plain, the way Miss Ruthie had raised her, in a modest house full of good light and empty of anybody who wished her a moment's harm. Her grandmother's little wooden heirloom sat on the dresser where her eyes could find it first thing every single morning. Those eyes were lighter now than they had been in more years than she cared to count. The weight she had hauled all the way up to that 4th floor had finally, mostly, set itself back down on solid ground. That morning, a small girl sat on the floor between her knees, a child from one of the families her company looked after, motherless, guarded, all knots and hard silence, exactly the way Naya herself had once been at that same age a long time ago and 2 hours south of everything she had since become. "Sit still now," Naya told her, soft as an evening coming down. "We don't pull, we don't panic. We work through it slow, one knot at a time, and every knot comes loose in the end." The child's small shoulders came down a whole inch. "That's it. Now you hear me good. Patience is a kind of power, baby, and anybody who ever tries to tell you it is weakness, you don't believe them, not for one single day of your life." The wound had turned itself into an inheritance, and that is the whole of it, plain enough for a child on a floor to hold in both her hands. A person's worth was never once about what a room of strangers decided it was able to see. Real strength does not shout, and it does not beg. It gets built slow, in the places where nobody is watching, with your own 2 hands, and it is carried with dignity long, long after the loud ones have spent themselves clean out and gone silent. The people who count you out are only ever telling you what their own eyes cannot reach. They are never, not once, telling you the truth of what you actually are. You just spent all this time watching the whole world get one good woman wrong for 10 straight years. So here is the only thing I will ask you to carry out of this place with you. Don't you be the world. If you have ever been underestimated, if you have ever stood dead still and swallowed it whole while people counted you all the way out, then this story was for you. And somewhere inside you already know that it was. So do me something before you go. Like this video for Naya. Share it with the woman in your own life who carries her strength in the one place nobody ever thinks to look for it. And subscribe so you're right here the next time one of the overlooked ones finally rises all the way up onto her feet. Come sit with us again real soon, because in the end, every single time, it's the still ones who turn out to have the loudest endings of them all.